but also their commitment to community and being involved and engaged within the communities that they work in, especially Lake Oswego. And Mark has shown this for as long as I've known him, and even before. If you're around town, you've seen Mark. He's at the 4th of July parade. He's involved in chamber and Rotary and the Lakewood Center, just to name a few things. He's raised both families here in Lake Oswego. You also often see him around town with them, which is so exciting. And I went through leadership with his wife, Tenley. So I know her from that. And Mark served on the Chamber Board of Directors as well as Chamber President. So again, he's a very much an important piece of person within our community. So thank you, Mark, for all you do. And thank you for bringing Aldrich services into our community as well and making them such an important part. And I'm also very excited to have with you the CEO, John Lauseng. Welcome. It's nice to meet you. And one thing that I found really exciting when Mark was sharing with me yesterday a little bit about John is that when he came to the company about 2009, they instantly saw him as a leader. And so he's became a CEO, I believe, in 2020. Is that correct?
Right.
But they had his eye on him from early on, and they, when they were choosing a new CEO, it was really important to have someone who was, younger, not kind of some older person who has different leadership and kind of comes from a different generation, but someone who could kind of span both the younger and the older generations and bring the company along. So I thought that was really special. And I think it also says a lot about the company, which is looking after its people and wanting to lead and grow their people. And just one more thing before I pass it on is that they have so many recognitions of being like the best company to work for throughout the US. They have offices throughout the United States and also in India. And when you go to their webpage, it's really impressive. Most admired company, best company to work for. And then they also have accolades within their individual services as well. So I'm just so excited to have you both here. And Mark asked me to keep it short and sweet. So I'm going to wrap this up and pass it over to you both. Thank you so much for being here today and giving us your time.
Well, thank you for the introduction. That was fantastic. And I'm really honored that you asked us to be here. We're going to start by doing brief introductions of ourselves. You did a wonderful job, though, so we don't need to go into a lot of depth. Provide a little bit more broad description of what Aldrich is, and then get into some of the principles that make it really special. And one of the things that Mark brought up that we're going to try to weave in is this concept of generational leadership and what has transcended time and what changes. So with that.
So we've got a lot we want to cover, and we want to be respectful of time. John and I've talked about this. We've got 4 different things we're going to touch on very briefly. We're going to talk about them really from our perspective with our experience from Aldrich. So the generational piece is something I want to mention. For those of you that know me, John and I have a couple years difference between the two of us. In fact, we really are literally a generation apart. John is the same age as my oldest son, I think. And so I don't say that to embarrass you, John. I say that more maybe to embarrass me about how old I am. But one of the things we want to talk about briefly and challenge maybe the group that's listening is, do some of these leadership principles transcend generations? Or what worked 30 years ago, does that work today? So we're going to weave that through. Rachel, thank you for the introduction. You said a lot more about myself than you probably deserve to, or that I deserve to have you say about. But the only thing I want to weave through is really 2 things. One is, early in my career, even before my career started, I was always intrigued by leadership. President of my high school, ASB or what that kind of stuff, but I never knew what being a leader was about. In the early 80s, when I had a little bit of downtime driving to and from clients, I started listening to tapes on leadership. And these are people, Stephen Covey and Ken Blanchard and these old school guys. But the themes that kind of came through that really got me intrigued on what it's like to be a leader. And so fast forward to when I joined Aldrich in 1990, there was 20 of us. We had an office only in Salem, Oregon. And I was having a conversation one day with our Steve Tatone, who was our CEO for 30 some plus years before John took the reins. And Steve said, okay, big boy, what's your idea? And I said, well, my idea is we need to be in Portland, or we need to be in Portland. We need to be in a bigger geography if we really want to grow the practice. And he said, okay, well, whoever comes up with the idea volunteers. So that's how we started the office in 1991. And so what I learned then, and then I'm going to let John talk about himself, is what I learned then is what I've tried to do for the last 30 years. And that is humility is a key part of leadership. You know, I could not have done any of that by myself. And what happened is the rest of the partners rolled up their sleeves and supported me, even though I was kind of on an island here in Lake Oswego. And fast forward to today, we have, I don't know how many offices, I don't even count them anymore, but Lake Oswego has over 100 employees. We have 400 people firm-wide. And again, my takeaway from that is when you're humble and you just put yourself in a position of service to others, that amazing things can happen. So, John.
So I'm a relatively local guy. I grew up in Newburgh. My family lives in Sherwood right now. My wife, I met at Oregon State. My wife of 19 years, and we've got 2 teenage daughters right now, which are the joy of my life and the challenge as well. I'm very fortunate. I started my career at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Portland and spent 6.5 years there. When I decided to leave, I knew that I still loved public accounting and client service, and I was going to look at all the other firms that were smaller, that were local, that wouldn't require me to move my family out of the Pacific Northwest. I met the leaders at Aldrich and very uncharacteristically decided like that I would join it. And the reasons I joined are still the reasons why I love this place and the reason why I feel an obligation to be a steward of maintaining this as a lasting business, independent for other generations. And, you know, Mark joked about mentorship. He was my mentor. I came in and he would meet with me once a month. I learned so much from him. I learned so much from Steve. But the reasons that I joined were, it was very clear that we had a group of people that cared for one another, a group of people that had figured out how to order their lives so that they had priorities that were more important in their world than Aldrich. And then when they came to Aldrich, they were ambitious for it. It was awesome to see people who were great mothers, spouses, community members who took care of their health, mental, physical, spiritual health, and then they could engage so well here and serve our clients at the level they serve. I also saw a firm that was extraordinarily entrepreneurial. So the example Mark gave about Steve challenging him is one we give a lot as an example for, we want people to do that. And we've got other examples. Another one is Scott Barkus, who in 1998 was a young accountant who saw an opportunity to start a wealth management practice. That was an uphill battle. We have $5 billion of assets under management now and an extraordinary client group and team. Another example is on this call. Eric Seifert was a tax senior manager who was exceptional and certainly on his way to partner. And he said, I think there's an opportunity to start an outsourced accounting business or modernize ours. And he's done that. So I'm taking way too long with my introduction, but I am weaving in some of the concepts. So the themes we're going to talk about are the importance of culture, aligning behaviors with values, servant leadership, stewardship and succession planning, and discovering our whys. And with that, I would like to ask Mark to start with a very difficult question to answer. What is our culture?
So one of the things that really impressed me about Aldrich when I joined was really early on, probably in the early to mid 90s. Yeah, there's technical training and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things we decided to do as a firm is we needed, and every business does this, mission, values, vision, those kind of things. But what's interesting is our mission and values and our overall culture, our acronyms that define our culture, are the same now as they were almost 30 years ago. And so I don't think a lot of businesses can say that. And so what that allowed us to do is we know who we are. And people that are with us and embrace Aldrich, that's who they are. And it doesn't work out for everybody. Not everybody wants that culture. Not everyone wants that discipline or that commitment to culture, but it's extremely important to us. And so one of the aspects of our culture really is servant leadership. It's what we do. It's what Steve Catone, our former CEO, modeled for 30 years. It's what John Lauseng does just as good, if not even better. And so to me, servant leadership is really pretty basic. And Dr. Korach just talked about this before. I know leadership, but servant leadership is simply lifting others up. It's putting others before yourself. It's looking for the best in people and looking to bring out the best in them and not looking for people's faults, but looking for what people's strengths are. And that's what John does. That's what I've tried to do. That's what our leaders try to do. What else would you like to add to that, John?
Well, I think about culture and there's, I mean, we work with a lot of organizations and everybody has a mission and a vision and values. You can tell, sometimes fairly quickly, sometimes more subtly, whether they actually live those or whether it's something that's on the wall. And, to go back a few years, so I was working with Steve Tatone transitioning in 2019. And we knew that we needed to establish a new strategic plan, a partner creed that would align our owners on the behaviors we would hold ourselves accountable and expect of one another. We did that and we talked about, people as our number one priority, our people, so that they could achieve our mission of helping our clients achieve their goals. And we made a big deal about that. And we talked about the things we were going to invest in, the commitment we were making to people's well-being, helping empower people to be successful in life and then at work. And then as you know, the February and March of 2020 hit and we were punched in the face. And to me, that was a time that demonstrated how organizations were going to live their values. We were fortunate to be in an industry where we didn't, absolutely have to shut down. So we were able to keep in business and we didn't have to, make some of the hard decisions that some businesses had to. But yet a lot of our peers were doing layoffs and furloughs and pay reductions. We went through our contingency planning and got unanimous support from our board and our entire partner group. And very early on during COVID, in our first all hands meeting from my living room, we were able to say, this is a safe place. We are still committed to those values. We're not doing furloughs, layoffs, pay reductions, terminations, any of that. Not only that, we're going to double up our energy on developing you, providing information in a transparent manner. And I've never been more proud to be part of an organization than I was then. And because it was the right thing, we flourished, we grew, we led our clients through that scary and uncertain time. And I'm just humbled by what people were able to do. That was us living our culture.
Right. And what, if I can just add to this, and what allowed us, I think, to do that through John's leadership, but through the rest of the organization, was coming back to our mission and our values. So, our why as a firm, and I think we're going to get this later, but I'm going to jump the gun on it. Is so our why as a firm is to improve the lives of our people, our clients, and our communities. So when you come back to, if you exist as an organization to improve the lives of your employees and your clients and your communities, why wouldn't you take the steps that John and the leadership team did during COVID to make sure that we had a safe place, to make sure we were doing the right things? And so again, it's that benchmark, if you will. That's not a good word, but it's a benchmark that we can come back to again and again to make sure we're doing the right things. So do we want to, I'm trying to be respectful of time here. Do we want to move on? We touched on servant leadership a little bit, but you want to talk about that a little bit, John, or have me?
I think you described it really well, actually. I think we should jump to stewardship and succession
Okay,
plan.
let's do that.
So I asked Mark to share a story about a partner retreat meeting before I was a partner.
Yes. So again, background. So one of the things we decided years ago, I'll try not to take too long with this, is you have a choice. A lot of people on this call are business owners. So I'm not telling you anything you don't really know. But as a business, when you get a few years in, you really have two decisions to make. Are you building the business to sell? Or are you building the business for the next generation? Are you going to build a lasting business? Or do you, old school CPA firm mentality is you work till you're 60 years old and then you sell to somebody else. And then, your employees will find a job someplace else, right? We made a conscious decision and we keep revisiting this decision every 5 years or so. And it's solid that we are a lasting business. Meaning, when you're a lasting business, you will do everything you can to make sure the Mark Birges aren't in the way, so to speak, of the John Lausengs, right? I mean, at the end of the day, what I need to do to be successful as a leader is put service above self and say, I'm going to make opportunities for John Lauseng and Eric Seifert and other people in the room to take over the firm and to lead, and not just give lip service to it, to really do it. What made it easy to make that decision was this exercise John's talking about. Is years ago, we were at a partner retreat, and I don't know how many there were, it doesn't matter. And besides, those of you that know me know I never let the facts get in the way of a good story. So we did this exercise, like, we are a lasting business, lip service. Are we a lasting business? Let's put people in buckets. So everyone that's 60 and over, go into one corner of the room. Anyone who's 50 to 59, go into another corner. 40 to 49, another corner. 30 to 39, another corner. the picture was worth 1,000 words. We looked at that picture and we went, oh my God, we're talking about being a lasting business, but all of our leadership, all of the people that run our industry niches, all the people that run our service lines are over 50 years old. And so we got to fix that. And so we did. We immediately, we in a nice way, we'd say, Mark, John is now running your service area. You support him all you can. And so that was, I don't know if that's exactly how you remember the exercise, but that's how I remember it. And it really did drive home the point that, you can pay lip service to things, but until you're actually willing to take action, it's just lip service.
Yeah, I didn't understand the concept of stewardship before joining this firm. And because Mark did that, because Steve and their peers did that, it's impacted my life deeply. It's allowed me to live a life where I'm really proud of my relationships with my family, my interests, my friends, most of the time my health, and then I can still be really ambitious for this firm. That's incredibly unique in our space. And so I feel a sense of stewardship now, not to make sure we don't destroy this, and we make sure that the next generations have the same opportunity. So I see really clearly with stewardship. And I just want to point out that being a lasting business, it's a nice thing to say. It's incredibly difficult to do, and it's becoming more challenging in our worlds, which are primarily, CPA firms and wealth management firms. There's a ton of consolidation and mergers. There's a ton of private equity coming in for the first time to our space because people didn't do what Mark did. They maximized their income. They maximized what they could get out of the business. They ran the engine hot, and now they've got to have someone else do their succession plan. And that's not a judgment statement. That is a strategy, and that's okay. That's just not who we've chosen to be. But to be a lasting business, as we're talking to our people right now, we have to recognize what that means and at what cost. So that means that we have to invest in the future. That means that we are investing significant amounts in our talent that's coming up, investing significant amounts in our technology and our infrastructure so that we can serve our clients better and more effectively, so that we're not going to be in a position where we have to sell the business. So I think that's really important. Discovering our why. And I think of this on several levels. I think we didn't have a purpose, or we had a purpose. We didn't name a purpose or have a why before we rebranded. So many of you may remember AKT. We rebranded 6 or 7 years ago. It wasn't a transaction. We wanted to not be confused with a phone company anymore. And so we went through a huge exercise, and a consulting firm named Sockeye came in. They interviewed our people. They interviewed our clients, they interviewed past clients, referral sources, community members, and they came back and said, we don't know yet what your logo should look like, what your website design will be, what your color palette will be, but your purpose is really clear. You exist to improve the lives of your people, your clients, and your communities. And we took that and said, yeah, that's exactly who we are. We painted it on our wall. We come back to that now time and time again. So we have our corporate purpose, and that's a good lens to put everything through. But I also ask everybody in our firm to make sure you understand your purpose. So when you get out of bed, what is the motive for what you're doing? It can't be ego, money, power, influence, because those are temporal. They just won't last. So what is your individual purpose? And is that aligned with how you have prioritized and ordered your life? And are you living that? So that when you're here, you're your whole self and you're happy and engaged. My purpose is really clear. It's to provide opportunities for other people to be successful in their lives and their careers.
And mine's even simpler, is to serve others. And I do it here still a little bit, and I do it in the community, and I try to do it at home, and I try to be the best spouse I can be and the best dad I can be. And again, I've got an ego, so that's not always easy for me to put others first. But what I have learned the hard way is when I do that, I'm successful. One thing I wanted to successful in a good way. What I wanted to weave back into something real quick, John, is the idea of, I think through the leadership things we talked about a little bit, but it's the idea of leaders also, in addition to lifting others up, have to know who they are, and you have to know who the people you're working with are. And by knowing who people are, I mean, and I'm not just talking about the skill and assessment tools that are out there, whether it's core values or whether it's Myers-Briggs or whatever. Those things are helpful. But what I've learned, and a lot of lessons of leadership I've learned, I have scrapes on my knees and my forehead from learning, and that is, it always is better to identify what people's strengths are and to work with them and play to their strengths for two reasons. One, people are better at doing stuff they're good at, and two is people feel better about themselves when they're doing things that they're good at. And I think the more we can do that as people, whether it's in work or whether it's in our volunteer work or whether it's just our relationships with our friends, because not everyone's wired the same. I mean, it's going to be a shock, but my core value is I'm a merchant innovator, which basically means I walk into a room and I want to spend 30 seconds with everybody in the room. I've never met a stranger. But you get me in a deep conversation and I get nervous. It's not my comfort zone. My wife is the opposite, and Mark knows her very well, and some other people do. She'll see somebody she knows at a party, and she'll be talking about deep philosophical stuff within 10 minutes, and I'll never pull her away from that person the rest of the day. So where am I going with that ramble? Where I'm going with that ramble is a couple of things. One is, I think it's important to know who you are. I think it's really critical to be who you are, right? And if we can do those things as leaders and just as good people in the community, I think it goes a long way toward achieving some of our objectives.
We're going to open it up to Q&A. I want to share one concept first that I heard recently that's completely off script. We had a speaker who came to us and said, do you realize right now that there's more uncertainty and complexity in the world than there has ever been? And at first it's a head scratcher because we go back and we just went through COVID and all the social injustice issues, and they said yes, and we haven't paid the price for that yet. And if you look at the world, if you look at geopolitics, anything, there is more uncertainty and complexity in the world, and there's this low-grade anxiety that's felt by a lot of the people in any organization. And they said the antidote to that is to know, where are we going, why are we going there, what part can you play, and what tools can I give you, and how can I help support you, and we'll be accountable to it. I overcomplicated that, but it's essentially the comfort that is felt by being part of an organization that has a purpose, who knows where they're going, why they're going there, and how they're getting there.
Questions? What do you think? Should we take some questions?
If we have time.
Yeah.
So how often do you guys, or have you guys, reached out for outside consulting to come in and just sort of shake the culture a little, or bring in new ideas, energy? Is that part of the way you maintain and develop your culture?
Yeah, I'll take that if you don't mind, because I have a joke. I don't even know if Mark's heard this, but ironically, we were very allergic to consultants for a long time.
Yeah.
We just, we've always been very good stewards of our resources, and consultants can be expensive. We've done a lot more of that lately, and we've had a tremendous benefit, and we've done it in areas. There's a group in Lake Oswego called Living Wholehearted. They do professional coaching and therapy. They also administer this core values index. And it's another version of, as Mark said, a personality profile. And the meaning of it is really to identify what others' core values are, so you can honor them in your interactions and your communication. So we administer that team by team to the entire business. And it's amazing, because there isn't a day that goes by where I don't hear somebody speaking in terms of their core value or your core value. More recently, we brought in some business development consultants to, and when you ask about, to shake up the culture, it actually has, because, as accountants, a lot of times people don't think of sales as being part of what we need to do, and they don't think of it necessarily in a good light. And really, it's to help them understand that, if we believe in what we're doing, selling is helping people. Not only that, but it also, the training helps us all be better active listeners, which helps us in turn be better members of our family or other communities we're part of. So those are just two examples of consultants we brought in. And I tell you that there's no question they have been worth every penny, and there's been exponential impact.
Well, Mark, if I can add to your question, the ultimate irony in all this to me is, for years, is that we're a consulting firm, and yet we had this, we wouldn't hire consultants, which just was weird. So, thank goodness we saw the light and we realized we can use help, and it's been very helpful for us.
Thanks.
Christopher.
Thank you both so much for being here. I just wanted to say that I had the good opportunity to meet with John ahead of all of this, and he shared some of those stories about how you stood by your people. And so I just want to congratulate you both on really walking the talk. I think that's I think you alluded to it several times where you said it's one thing to say these are our values or have them up on the wall. It's another thing to actually reinforce that with behavior. And I think that's a gap for a lot of different companies. And yet here you both sit with these great solid examples of how you've done that. If somebody else had a company and they were trying to instill that culture, when you think about making your culture a reality, is there anything, what is the most important part of turning that culture into a reality that you've seen? As a leader, what is the most important thing you can do to make that reality manifest in your company and in the people of your company?
Want to go? You want me to take a step? Go ahead. So from my perspective, Christopher, that's a super great question. What I think is, what again, it gets back to humility. So meaning that if you're going to change culture, you have to understand, and this happened to us, if you're going to change things, people have ownership in what they developed before. And if you have too much pride, you don't want to give that up, or you're going to give it up begrudgingly. If you can step back and say, one of my favorite shows is Ted Lasso, and it's like, don't be judgmental, be curious, right? So be curious, like, wow, John, I never thought about it that way. You mean if we were to approach this way with our clients, this could result in this? I never thought about it that way. Or if we were to pivot from focusing so much on dollars and cents and profitability, but really focus on improving the lives of our people and our clients and our communities, I wonder what impact that would have on the bottom line. So I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, Christopher, but that's what I look at. You have to have a whole dose of humble pie, and then you just have to kind of open up the kimono and say, yeah, I'm vulnerable. So help me, teach me what your ideas are and how do we get there?
I think there's a lot of different ways to answer that question, all of which would be very valid. I took it a little more structurally or tactically, and I think it's really important to the culture. And this is probably something that I've learned in the last 4 years is you have to have the right leaders in place. And culturally, that's more important than anything. That will have more of an outsized impact on the organization than anything else. And then you've got to make sure that those leaders are aligned not only on your strategy, but your mission, vision, value, which brings me to my other point, the need to continually communicate those, make decisions through those lenses and articulate why you're making those decisions. And then, back to humility in all your behaviors throughout the organization, making sure the leaders are demonstrating or living the culture.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I appreciate your.
And that answer right there, Christopher, is why John is CEO and I'm not. Strategic, yeah.
Nancy?
I wanted to say you guys are both so inspiring, and I'm taking notes and learning a lot. But I wanted to ask, and especially Mark, because I know about a lot of your volunteerism, but how does your volunteerism in the community impact your work and the business?
Oh boy, super great question. So what I would say, Nancy, I'll just speak to my experience. I'll let John speak to the corporate experience if we have time for that. So my experience is, because I figured out for me as a person and as a leader, or just as a person in the community, that being in the community, giving to others however I can, makes me better in the workplace. It actually makes me better at home too. Ask Tenley about that, Nancy, but I think she'll say the same thing. So that's what I've learned. So I've never done my volunteer work in the community, even with the chamber, which is focused on business. I've never done it with the expectation that I'm going to get a bunch of clients. I don't do that. I think early on in my career, I did that, and I was disappointed, I was frustrated, and I wasn't myself. And so when I just kind of said, I'm going to be who I am, and I'm going to volunteer, and I'm going to do things. And if work comes my way, it does. But I think what helps a little bit selfishly in the community is maybe the Aldrich brand gets embedded a little bit more in terms of we really are a service organization. We really do put service first.
Yeah. As an organization, we close our offices every year and deploy our 400 people in the US to go volunteer together. And the benefits of that are tremendous. I mean, the interpersonal connection, when you're doing physical labor next to somebody, you just get to know them better. It also is incredibly perspective setting and grounding, as I'm sure you all know from any service you've done. And then we also provide 2 full days for people to volunteer in the community in ways that matter maybe more personally to them. It used to be focused primarily on education, and we've expanded that because we've realized that there are other communities that are in need that people are passionate about. And so they've done that either individually, sometimes in their children's schools, or they've done that as groups. That can be a very bonding and grounding experience as well. And the byproduct is, yes, it does help our brand in the community. It's a representation of who we are. We started our leadership meeting this year by saying, aren't we fortunate? And that's something I keep coming back to, is we are always going to have challenges and complexity. We're always going to have things we need to work through here and improve on. But just taking a moment to have gratitude, aren't we fortunate for the people that we have in this organizations, for the clients we serve, for the communities that we're a part of? Aren't we fortunate? And I think that is reinforced anytime we give to the community.
Thank you both so much. Do we have any last questions for either Mark or John?
I don't know how to raise my hand on the little screen. So
Dan.
I have a quick question for you guys. It was interesting that right as this, 2 things I've discovered as this call started, I had a employee walk in and give me a 2-week notice. So that was exciting to have to hold my hand over my mouth and listen to her speech. And number 2, though, I feel very old right now because I actually took a college class from the aforementioned Ken Blanchard. So way back when, and went to college with his son, so who now runs their company.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask, how important, when do you bring up the fact in the interview process or whatever that you expect your people to give back, to work in the community, to do that? Or do you feel like they've done their research before they walk into your interview?
I think it probably depends on the interview and on the interviewee. If they've done their research, they'll know what we're about. And if they know what we're about, they'll know that that's part of our DNA. To be totally transparent, it's not part of a script. We really don't script the interviews. I know I've had some of those discussions, and I think we talk about generational leadership and what transcends or what changes. My observation, and this isn't a judgment call on any generation, this is incredibly important to the people coming in. They really demand a sense of purpose beyond the transaction, and they want to know, as part of their qualification of us, what we're doing to develop people, what we're doing to address diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. If we take stances on social justice issues publicly, what our commitment is to our communities and how that manifests. So that's interesting. It's not part of our questionnaire. I do think it comes up, and more often than not, it's probably the interviewee bringing it up.
And the only thing I was going to add to that question, I know we're running out of time, is if it's newer hires, like brand new people coming out of school or whatever, I think I completely agree with John, because that's kind of built in the DNA, that people, they want to know their purposes, or is this an organization that's going to allow them to fulfill their purpose. I think when we're interviewing senior hires, transfers or whatever you want to call it, I think, at least I know when I was involved with that, I did try to talk more about our values and culture and stuff like that, because if someone's got 10 years experience and they don't fit the culture, we're wasting our time. Whereas the newer people, there's time for them to learn it and to be part of it and to build the team. So that's the one thing I would add to that. Great. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you both so very much. I don't know, Bill, have we had anybody who's kind of echoed your sentiment so directly? Dr. Korach is such a big fan of the belief that the more you develop as an individual, the better a leader you become. And gentlemen, that's been, that message has come through loud and clear in what you've said and in the behaviors you've taken. So thank you so very much for being here. Thank you so very much for being such a great example of what good leadership looks like. Anything else you want to say to him, Bill?
Yeah, I really appreciate the messaging that you've just done. because all the things we work on are inherent human qualities that you can improve in to become a better leader, because leadership is always about relationships, and relationships are very, very meaningful. They're the basis of culture. I mean, you couldn't have done a better job of hitting the kinds of things we work on. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. You've just affirmed a heck of a lot that matters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was an honor.
We're gonna break them.
Christmas on there.
So yes, Liz, this is our time for a break, right? So we give everybody a chance to shut their thing off if they want. How long of a break are we taking?
10 minutes. We'll be back at 9:47.
All right. Thank you all.
Comes on the recording. We'll invite everybody back to turn on your screen, and Bill Korach will begin now.
Great, thank you very much, Liz. I want to remind you that when we do some interactions and you want to respond to one of the questions that I throw out, Liz is going to help me with that by identifying the person, and that way I won't mess up as much as I did last time by not being able to see the upper left of the screen. What I want to start with is exactly where we left off last time, and say that, okay, you've read through this, you have an idea of the ideas. I'll be picking spots here. I will not have enough time to go through everything, but I'll try to pick the things that are most meaningful and that you develop more interest in. But to start with, nobody's perfect. Nobody knows everything there is to know. We're all vulnerable. We're all human. And so what you're trying to do in developing yourself with the kind of things I'm sharing with you will make you better as a person and as a leader. Nothing that we're doing is out of line with what would have meant a significant amount of personal gain in the 1920s as it does today. So I love the way they characterized that to start out with. So let's look at something and see if it stands that test with you. I've got a quote at the very top of the page. I want to look at that with you. And I want you to think about it, and I want you to respond as I frame a question about it. I remember a graduation speech in my 27 years of superintending, making graduation speeches, talking about the courage to be uncertain and the strength to be vulnerable, in terms of we're all human. And when we work with people, we have to realize that the best qualities you can bring to the table matter. And the best qualities that you encourage other people to bring to the table matter. So when you talk about strength to be vulnerable, why are you vulnerable as a leader? Just who's willing to give their take on it? Aren't you bulletproof when you're the leader? You get to do whatever you want. You get to tell other people what to do. Or is that really leadership anymore?
You got Lauren out there.
Okay, Lauren, go ahead. How do you respond? How do you respond, Lauren?
Well, I think you open yourself up for judgment. And yeah, that's a scary thing.
Yeah, especially when you know that people see the world differently. Anytime you act, there'll be people potentially that'll have very strong negative reactions to what you're doing.
And you have Shelley?
Shelley,
Yes, to go off what Lauren said, I think it also allows you to, it makes you put your biases aside and you start really becoming more aware of questions that you have, and you have to kind of put those to the side to be able to be open and listen to what the other person is saying and realize you may not agree. But I think it makes you a better leader, because sometimes you realize, oh, okay, they have a good point, you know, and you learn a lot from them as well as you're trying to get.
you're making a very important point, Shelley. If you want to model, or because you have to be the light that demonstrates the qualities you want to see in others and encourage them to be that. So if you want people to listen to you, what do you have to do?
Listen to them.
Listen to them.
And you've got Andrea?
Andrea.
Yeah, this might just be rephrasing what they've just said, but as a leader, you don't know all the answers. And if you are vulnerable enough to say to the people around you, actually, I don't have all the answers, and some of the best answers will come from those around you, then, you know, that's how you take advantage of a more diverse body politic, so to speak. You know, a more diverse group of people in the room is going to provide you with the best answer moving forward.
Excellent. Every beginning of the year speech that I ever made as superintendent of schools in my 27 years, I also always built in something that I had screwed up. Why? I mean, you've got to be strong enough. George, good to see you again. You have so much to offer. We're glad to see you.
I don't know about that. You actually just started. You just started into what I was going to talk about when you talk about vulnerability, is actually owning your own errors. And in my career, what I've seen is a lot of people who displaced errors, wouldn't accept responsibility in roles of leadership. And in those moments, they absolutely lose the organization completely by not having the ability to say, I was wrong, and recognizing that and being able to point out where they were wrong and how to make the corrections to those issues. So that the ownership piece becomes super huge, because what you do is you actually endear yourself to the organization, because they see that ability to accept responsibility, have an open mind, and then move forward. So now I'm going to figure out how to take my hand down if somebody else.
Excellent.
And you have Jamie?
Jamie. Jamie,
I'm working on it. I was
got it.
working on it, learning
Okay.
how to do that. Yeah. Something like making yourself vulnerable in areas you're not strong in, like calling someone out on something they do wrong. I struggle with that because I identify too much, and being able to say, I'm not great at this, but this is something we've got to do, and either finding someone to delegate that to that is better at it, or we're going to muddle through this together. I'm not great at it. And being able to verbalize the areas that you're not strong in.
Excellent. Nancy, last one.
So it's, this is just playing off of what George was saying. I find that when you're able to admit your mistakes as a leader and own up to them and what you might have changed, you also make the people around you more fearless. They're willing to try and break new ground because they're not afraid of failing. They're, that it's okay.
Excellent. It gives them permission to not be perfect with you. And one of the problems you have with leadership is that you really need people to give you accurate information about what's going on around you. And so if you make them fearful of that, or fearful about something that they think they've done that could cause a problem down the road, they're going to be more hesitant to give you the details that you really need to be able to act on it. All right, let's go to that courage to be uncertain. courage to be uncertain. What's that about? Who's up for that?
Bill, I'll take a run at it if you like.
Sure. Thanks, Mark.
So one of my favorite definitions of hell is fixed ideas. And we tend, because of the sheath of ego we create, to create a world, driven by our fears, expectations, anticipations, etc. And the trick is to understand that you got to get what the Buddhists call beginner's mind and just endlessly be flexible and open to, what is going on in the world. And, you often hear about some of the most successful companies that have not become hierarchical, where they have, really flat leadership relationships where everybody can contribute, bring energy, creativity, and new ideas. And, that's a lot of what you hear from John and Mark at Aldrich. There is a huge commitment to, the health of the folks. I was talking to an accountant from an old line firm the other day, and he said, yeah, I'm getting retired. I'm 50 years old. I haven't taken care of my, 55 years old. I haven't taken care of myself. I want to go, get on a program and get healthy, before I die of a heart attack. You think about the next generation of some of these firms and being really creative. The Aldrich guys are a great example of that.
Yep, they are. Very good.
Yeah, Melissa?
Melissa, last one.
Thanks. First of all, I had my one-on-one with Mark last night and it was amazing. So thank you, Mark, again. I think what comes up for me is I think I grew up sort of thinking that leaders were all-knowing, and or maybe people who are parents feel this way. Like I'm not a parent, but I can imagine, like I thought my parents knew everything, and now that I'm 45, I'm like, whew, man, there's a lot that you don't know as a grown-up. And so I think for me, one of like a big turning point was when I started helping my team frame things as experiments. Here's what we do know. Here's what we don't know. Here's what we think might be the next right thing to do. So let's try it out and let's check in at a certain period of time to like validate, like, was our hypothesis accurate? What did we learn? What do we need to change as a result of that? And then let's run the next experiment. And so just having that, like a system that tolerates, we don't know all the answers and we don't have to know all of them to do the next right thing.
Perfect. Perfect in the sense that oftentimes if you're going to lead, you're going to be moving forward somewhere. Okay. Or trying to move forward somewhere. And you don't know if it's going to work or not. There are all kinds of variables that could trip you up or that you didn't consider. And so that ability to be uncertain, but to move forward with it, because doing nothing sometimes is the right call, but sometimes it's disastrous. And so now, what about this last thing? What about light the way to have the insight to create the conditions for other people's success? You know that I started with that. I believe that that's one of the key things for a leader to understand. It's not about you. It's about what you do for others that really matters in them being capable and grow because of you, because you help them to grow. And so, but what do you do? What is it that you do that allows you to light the way? What does that mean? Light the way. Stand up with a lantern or what? What does it mean?
I think
it's a metaphor.
I think it means make it a safe environment, right? If you want people to participate and help you get down a path, any path, that means you need to make them feel safe and secure that if the path they chose is wrong, that there's not retribution for it, that you're all learning together. So everyone's going to make mistakes. And again, that goes back to the vulnerability, right? They're going to see you make a mistake and realize it's not the final, it's not a all ending mistake. And that's the way you learn to get to the end.
Yeah, Rachel.
Good job, Dan. Rachel.
I think it's also making sure that you keep doors open for people to continue to grow and learn, and that you encourage growth and learning throughout, I'm going to say, their career in this case. Because if you put up blocks, then they're going to feel stifled and not be happy. So it's giving them mentorship, giving them growth opportunities, and helping them find their joy in what they're doing.
All right, now, what's the best way to do that? What do you have to be able to do to accomplish that? Because you're asking them to be vulnerable. You're going to create conditions for safety. But you also have to do what to light the way? You better what? You better model what you want to see in them. And if you're not growing and actively communicating with them about your growth, to model lighting the way. And the people that are close to you that you're working around aren't stupid. And if you're expecting them to grow and improve and continue to work at becoming the person that they're capable of becoming, you better model it.
Cecily.
Cecily.
Yes, I really resonate everything that we mentioned here. There's one area that I would like to learn more is, with all of things that being the leader is a vulnerable, providing safe environment for other people to grow. There's element that I would like to see. We encourage is one side. The other one would like to be vulnerable or wanting to follow the light is a different story. Timing and energy and the willingness belong to that person, individual development DNA. So I would like to hear more about that. Thank you.
Okay, well, one of the things that's really important about that, and I appreciate the question, is that other people are not going to grow in the same way you need to grow. Their growth, their becoming who they're capable of, we're not alike. And so there are some leaders who think you becoming exactly like them is what you're trying to do. We want to have other people grow in their own way, and they have their own time frames. They have their own things that are really important to them. Growth is a broad area of capabilities that we're wanting to encourage. And that's where that notion of really knowing them and encouraging them to do the things and to try the things that are going to work best for their world and for them. Okay, so that's the best thing I can say about that. All right, now let's look at something else. Want to throw that up on the screen again? Oh, it's already got it. Let's look at the screen again. Now, I'm putting back in front of you for today some of the things that we've already talked about, but I want to make sure you understand that all of this next section down to the blue is about trying to help you understand that your brain is a very, very important part of your ability to make good decisions. But your brain started to be able to make decisions quickly and as accurately as possible. But it started as we evolved in a survival environment. If you didn't make a quick decision, you had the possibility of not being in the game any longer. So your ability to make a snap decision, a decision right away, your brain is going to do that. And it's a good thing that it does, because it tries to protect you, but it only can protect you with what you have in that brain, in your experience, in your knowledge, in your capabilities. It's going to pick from what it has available. However, you have the ability, because human consciousness gives us the ability to be aware of our own awareness. And if you are aware of your own awareness, now you're able to make a choice that's broader than just what you know, understand, and have experienced. Does that make sense? It's your ability to realize you don't have all the information you need, but you'll make that first reaction anyway. But oftentimes, if you make that first reaction with the first thing you think of, you can be aware of what that reaction was, and when it's appropriate, because it might have been exactly the right thing to say or to do. But if it's not, you have the ability to rethink it, and instead of react, to respond. And there are strategies to be able to do that. Like if you say something that you wish you wouldn't have said, and in an extreme sense, you can say, well, I need to think about that a little more. I wish I wouldn't have said that. The more I think about it, I'd like to have a little time to think about what your question is or what your statement is. There are ways to make that transition, and you're human, they're human. And so the thing that you really need to also try to keep in mind is naming isn't knowing. Just because you can name let's do gardening, because I'm a dirt person. Just because you can name a plant that's a rhododendron, and you buy a rhododendron and want to plant it in your yard, you know it's a rhododendron, you can name it. What kind of a root system does a rhododendron have? What particular kind of rhododendron did you buy, and what's its bloom cycle? How much sun can it take? I'm going through attributes that are going to help you plant it in the right place. If you don't focus on what are the critical attributes about what I'm talking about, what are the essential things for me to think about? Because that what, why, how framework is what is it really that we're trying to address here, and make sure you define it as best you can. And then we just heard, what's your why? Why does it matter that you put it in the right place and that you feed it properly and to get the result that you want? And then how does it work? How does this particular thing work into the yard, and where it's going to bloom and when it's going to bloom, and that what, why, how framework. If you start into conversations about something that you can name, but you don't know the attributes of, how's that going to work? You can say things, but okay. Now let's.
You have a question from Lauren.
Lauren, where are you? There.
I'm here. Yeah, I just, have a question about there's a difference between people who seem to be really quick on their feet and can say the right thing like right away. And then there are some people who aren't quick on their feet and maybe blunder or don't know what to say the wrong thing. Can you tell me the difference between why some people know what to say and why some people just don't have that quick thinking on their feet skill?
Well, one thing that we know is that people's cognitive ability to read the context varies. So that's one variable. The other thing that I think you can, through practice, you can improve. But some people just have better strengths in areas that you might not have a good strength. How many of you can sing? How many of you can actually sing? Yeah, I can see some hands. I could practice singing for the rest of my life and you still wouldn't want to hear it. So we have different gifts and we have different cognitive abilities. And so, but if you know something that you have to be aware of that you don't have great ability with, what I'm suggesting is you try to work at things so you get good enough at it.
Can
You're
you
never
get
going to
better
get
at that?
Pardon? Who said what?
Lauren, you're muted.
Can you get better at that? I mean, is that something somebody's able to actually get better at? Is quick
To
thinking.
the best of your ability, but you have to be aware of it. And that's a really good thing right now to use as a transitional thing, Lauren, because I want you to go into your groups and you know what you have here. Look at the visual. One of the things that is so important is for you to look at these ideas that we're working on and figure out how they connect. Your personal growth can be enhanced through practice. You can get better at things if you're aware of it. You're not going to be not out of the box, outstanding at everything.
I
You
want
have
to
an
be Christopher.
Pardon?
I want to be Christopher.
Okay, well, that's a good goal. Take a look at him and see what he's doing and see how he did it. And he's a pretty amazing guy. You're probably not going to be a guy if you're a female. And so, but does that matter? Or, you know, I mean, look at him and see what you can do to have some of the abilities that he has. All right. You have to weave these ideas together so they're interconnected and you can pull on the things that you need to have in your mind based on the situational circumstances. If you have these ideas and it's all isolated, you won't pull in the things that matter most for you to think about to be able to be the person you want to be. If the more isolated they are, the less you're going to benefit from them. So weaving these ideas together like the weaver does requires you to connect the ideas. Like if you went through the presentation that we started today with, and you didn't recognize that we were just gifted with point after point after point that were reinforcing the things you're already learning, and you didn't connect the dots on those things, and just saw that as a wondrous new thing that you were just learning, then you're not connecting the essential ideas. And that's what we're working at. We have half a year to continue to do this. So let's do one of the questions that Willingham says that people are naturally curious, but they're not naturally good thinkers. So let's take that one, and I want you to come up with the best argument that supports what he believes. How can you take the stuff that we have worked on and come up with specific things that would support why he believes from his research that we're naturally curious, inherently curious, but not naturally inherently good thinkers. So with your groups, you've got 10 minutes to go ahead and come up with just one of those two questions, and then have a person who's willing to share your best thinking.
Okay, we'll be back at 10:26. Right. And off they go. All right, they're all coming back.
Super, thank you for returning. Okay, we have a speaker from each group, hopefully, and we would like to see the collective wisdom of the group. So, okay, who's up, willing to go first?
I'll go first.
Uh,
Hi. So we had a pretty good conversation. It was just some great insight there. The thought process, are we going to answer both sides of your question?
No, I'm trying to just do the one side because we have a limited amount of time and I want to get to some of the other things.
Okay, great. One of the great insight that Jamie said in our group was the basis of every horror movie is the natural curiosity and not good thinking, right? The person who walks into the garage where the saws are hung, looking for a way to escape as they walk by the car that's running, right?
Right.
So
right.
to me, that really summed it up pretty well. And I thought, wow, that's some incredible insight. And many people like Stephen King have made a lot of money playing on that. So good for them. And I think the other thing that Christopher touched on is a lot of it has to do with making sure you collect the data that's involved in making the decision and utilize that to get through the naturally curious, but then also come up with a good decision on the backside by allowing you to realize you don't know everything, no matter what the skill set is. There's going to be someone who knows something you don't, or even they may look at it differently than you do.
Very good. Very
Larry,
good.
followed by Sarah.
Okay, Larry.
So our group actually talked through both sides of it and didn't quite come to a conclusion. We noted that children are naturally curious, and that's how they learn. But we also raised the question as whether curiosity is declining. And one of the observations was that with the algorithms today reinforcing our bias in the social media, that you get less curious. We also came to the conclusion that part of good thinking is collecting the data to basically test whether your decisions are correct, and that the essence of good decision making is to constantly revisit your decisions and making sure they're correct.
Super. Who's up?
You have Sarah, followed by Caitlin.
Sarah.
Hi. So what our group talked about for just the first question was that same idea that we talked about before, that the mind is just designed to quickly react without thinking things through. And we talked about how we get stuck in our rituals and habits, and they lead us to automatic reactions. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of get lazy and go with what we think things are and how they should be, rather than, and just go with that. So kind of to answer the part about so you're not a good thinker, but you could have curiosity, is that we just get stuck kind of in what we're doing, and our natural reaction is to just go with that. And I also just wanted to add that I loved the idea, how they're talking about how it's that is the premise of all horror stories, right? Or movies, is that we do just react, and it's things that we don't think through until later. It's that whole idea that hindsight's 20/20, right? Looking back, it's oh, I should have done this. But we have those initial reactions that we kind of just get stuck in, and our body is designed to do that. And we're stuck in our habits that we have going, and we just automatically go to the easiest path.
Yes. Excellent.
Yes. Caitlin?
Caitlin.
Our group talked about a little bit of both sides as well. but we talked about how curiosity in itself is a thought. If you're curious, you are in fact thinking. However, it is what you do with that thought. If you're curious and don't do anything with it, well, then you're not using your thinking properly. But if you do something with it, then you are still thinking and you're learning. And a lot of people don't do that, whether it be fear or just not wanting to. It's really what you do with the thought that is thinking.
Good, good. Where are we now? We got everybody?
One more, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to raise my hand for some reason.
Oh, Kelly, please.
Sorry, thank you. I think that innately we're all naturally curious, but I also think that we all have our own ways of processing information. And in that, you know, there's no right or wrong way to show up in the experience, but to be able to recognize that, you know, our view of the world may be different, and to hopefully just lean into not just standing in line and following a direction, but be willing to ask the questions that are important for us to framework our own information.
Super, super. The one thing that you didn't say is that, going back to the horror story example, when you're stressed out and fearful, what do you have to do to think better? What do you think is happening to your ability to think when you're stressed out, fearful, and
Yes, Sarah and Christopher.
okay.
You need to pause and breathe and take a moment.
Okay. Yep. That there are things you can do, like take a breath, start thinking. Okay, Christopher, what do you got?
You've talked a lot about the power of the pause, Dr. Korach, and how important that is, but Dan shared something in our group today that I thought was a good mental hook. I don't know how many of you remember from being a child, the whole stop, drop, and roll. Like if you're on fire, stop, drop, and roll. But Dan utilized that to say, when you're in that situation, stop, drop that initial emotional response, and roll through some thoughts about where you want to come back to. And just because I'm so familiar with that childhood stop, drop, and roll, I thought that was a very fun application of that, and to remind us to slow our ride, get it together, and do it.
Great example, because you're getting your body to react differently, hopefully, to start moving in a different direction with your thoughts and being more open. And so fear really gets you to get more tangled up with yourself. And so you don't do your best thinking. Alcohol will also be a problem with that. So anyway, okay, we're gonna look at the resilience and readiness part of the lesson, and then we're gonna close out on curiosity. But I do want to look at the two things here. I put resilience first rather than readiness first. What we're doing in our working together is building readiness. I mean, we're really looking at what kinds of things can you learn to become more ready to be the person you want to be, and more ready to be the person that in the crisis situation will be able to respond to in your best interest. So I'm going to take the bottom one first. I probably should have put it first, but sometimes I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing after I do these things. So readiness is all. I know when we look at readiness, one of the things that I do want to stress here is the problem with readiness is you have no idea what you're getting ready for. If you think about it, you don't know the challenges you're going to face in your life with absolute certainty. There are things that you know that you're going to face, but until you experience them, it's hard to know how to get ready for some things that you don't want to have happen and you've never really thought about. But one of the things then that I want to stress there is there's an advantage in knowing that you're preparing for the unknowable. And the advantage is the more you learn, the more capable you become, you're going to have more to draw from. And so working at becoming the person that you want to become on an ongoing basis will give you the best possible capabilities that if you want to keep growing, you need to keep practicing, you need to keep working at becoming the person that you're capable of becoming. But patience is necessary to keep practicing, to deliberately practice, to pick something you want to get better at and practice it every day. And reflect on how you've been doing and continue to try to improve. And because human beings and leadership being about relationships, you have so many opportunities to practice what we work on. Every day you're interacting with lots of different people. And so when you look at that particular one, I think it's important to realize that practice, and practice, because the first time you learn something, the first time you try to understand something that's new to you, your understanding of it is going to be very surface level. For you to go deeper, you're going to have to keep looking at ways to apply it and understand it that you've never thought of. And those bursts of inspiration that come with understanding about how something can fit and work for you, they only come after several opportunities to practice something, to see how it's going to be something that you can use in your world. Because if you don't see it as something you can use in your world, you're going to have it in isolation, but it won't necessarily come to you when you need it. Now, resilience. Let's look at resilience. The thing with resilience is you got the benefit of knowing what has happened, that you're having to be resilient because it's happened. So what I want you to do is think about adaptation. And I have written here like any major challenging undertaking, adaptation requires attitude and effort. So positive attitude, keep moving forward, and effort are going to be required. We know that. That's easy. Now, doing it isn't necessarily easy. I have a good friend that just had his son, who's a 40-year-old person with 2 small children, who just got the diagnosis that he has Lou Gehrig's disease. And he's working through understanding what this means to his family and what he's going to have to build his life around to be what his son needs right now. And so it's definitely going to take an attitude about where his most meaningful things are in life. And effort. It's going to take effort. We know that. But I want you to look at the other list that I put down here, and I want to see if you can explain to me why 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are also things that can matter a great deal when you look at resilience and trying to become the person that you're capable of being, even though you're up against a challenge that is causing you to have to really work with yourself to be resilient. So let's try number 1, which is genuine acceptance, being honest with yourself. Why would that be important? Genuine acceptance.
I'll take a crack at it, Bill, because you're a baseball player like I am.
Yep.
Somebody throws you a curveball, you whiff it, and you say, God, I'm so masked. I didn't know that was a curveball. What am I going to do next? As opposed to being ready for the fastball or the knuckleball, right? So it's constantly renewing your ability to be present and not carrying the dross of regret, negative emotions, or anxiety.
Mm-hmm. And with that, you've got to be able to come to terms with the fact that you swung and missed. I mean, the reality, if you can't, there are people who try to block. My brother, his girlfriend once described how my brother Larry deals with adversity, and she told me he just ignores it.
We have Caitlin followed by Trevor.
Okay, Caitlin.
If you can't accept what's happened to you, then you can't move on. If you have to genuinely accept it to then be resilient and figure out a path through it, or else you're just in denial and trying to ignore it, or trying to find a way around it instead of through it.
Exactly. 2 good examples. Anybody else?
Trevor followed by Christina.
Trevor.
Yeah, it was a little bit of humor injected, but being up the river of denial without a paddle isn't doing yourself any favors. Yeah, Caitlin and I had the same idea.
Christina? Can't hear you.
My mute button was stuck. Sorry.
Okay.
I was just going to build on that just a little bit and say, until you accept the situation, you can't really come at it with your truest and most appropriate strength, right? We all have different talents that we can bring, and until you can accept it for what it is, which one do you call on right now?
Wow, excellent.
We have Joyce followed by Jamie.
Joyce.
I think as human beings, nobody wants to accept that they're wrong. You know, like Christina had just said earlier, we have to accept or understand and take responsibility that there is something going wrong that we need to address in order to move forward versus just sweeping it under the carpet, which is sometimes more easier, especially if we don't have the ability to change the outcome. Like in your friend's case, he has a diagnosis that he cannot fix. So different situation from something less significant.
Okay.
Jamie.
Jamie.
Hello, you know I've always got something to say. So if you think about, let's say it's trauma, you've learned you have Lou Gehrig's disease. You have learned there's no money in the bank. Your car's being repossessed, something like that. And you don't deal with it, then the strengths that you could bring to the next situation are not going to happen because you've not processed it. And it's still going to be there. It's just kind of, you consciously or unconsciously put it at the bottom of the priority list, and the strengths you could have had from processing that, you're not going to have until you deal with it.
Excellent. You guys are really sharp. Let's, because I need to move to curiosity. I want to pick one more. Which is the one that you would need to have less ability to understand why I put it there? Can anybody come up with one that doesn't make sense to you? Okay, I'll just pick one. Let's go, Shelley. Go ahead.
Okay, there we go. Hi. Number 3, the pursuit of promise.
Okay. How about that? Let's try that. Pursuit of promise, intentional actions. You're going to take intentional actions. But in pursuit of promise, what does that mean? I've had several occasions to work with people that were dealing with challenging situations and needed to adapt. Adaptation is important. And there's a tendency to not understand the reality and pursue things that aren't going to get you what you need. That whole pursuit of what's going to be a promising path for me to go down, and try to not pick paths that have very little promise in them. And so that's how I see that, and I see people that try to do that. They just still haven't gotten to the point where they have accepted the reality, and they will pursue things that are similar to the reality that they used to have, but that's not going to be productive for them.
Trevor, Caitlin, and Andrea.
Okay, Trevor.
So essentially, making sure to consciously engage in activities and actions which serve your higher purpose, to not have diminishing returns, but exponential returns in what you're trying to achieve, correct?
Well, yeah, let me give you an example. I was counseling a guy who was teaching French in a university in on the East Coast, and he was his position was eliminated in a cost-cutting thing, and so I tried to get him to see he needed to pursue 3 different things. He needed to pursue and lock in on trying to find another teaching French job in a university so he could continue doing what he loved doing. But he also needed to come up with a plan B to teach something not in a university, like possibly teaching high school French. And he needed to have something that he needed to get ready for, because if he can't do either of those things, he still needs to help support his family.
Similar to it working at New Seasons Market cashier while you're trying to get licensed in chiropractic during the
And
pandemic.
that's where I met you, my God.
Yeah, exactly.
You have Caitlin and then Andrea.
Caitlin.
I think it kind of is like you can have 2 paths come up like a fork in the road. One might be immediate gratification, but sets you back in the long run from what you're trying to gain at. And the other one might have a lot of speed bumps and it might be really hard, but in the long run, you know that one's best, and you have to put your long-term goals ahead of your immediate, like, I really want to go to Disneyland, but I know I should probably do this. And you have to do the other one that you don't want to at that time.
Good job. Excellent. One more.
Andrea.
Andrea.
Thanks, and it's Andrea. I think, sometimes a change comes that might alter a goal. Like you might have lifetime goals that are associated with a particular path that you're on. And if a significant change comes that throws you off that path, you need to reevaluate where you are headed and not like, I can see easily getting trapped in trying to continue to pursue that goal, but when it's unrealistic. And so you sort of have to like look further down the road and say, now, is that still actually a realistic goal or a promise? Or do I need to reevaluate, you know, more than just this fixing this one situation or approaching this one situation? So kind of you know, getting back to your why statement, getting back to your purpose. What is my purpose? And now how do I adapt?
Excellent, excellent comment. All right, let's flip the page and let's look at curiosity, because there's something here that I really want to have you look at very, very carefully. I know you've read this. I know you've read Brene Brown on that, and I know that we want to have a good idea of what really matters about curiosity. So I would say we need to look at number 2 and number 3 of the things that you have read there. I know you've read this, and I know you understand. I think I was very clear in 1 and 2, and 3 and 4. So 2 and 3, let's look at 2. The brain inherently calculates what one might learn in the short term, but does not what? But does not, and this is important, does not factor in long-term possibilities, challenges, does not factor in the future. Now, you've heard me say leadership is always about the future. Any decision you make as a leader is about what's coming next. And so if your brain does not want to focus on the future, it's naturally, inherently going to try to learn more about what it already knows. Who's going to have to take control and realize that your brain is not going to help you there when you're thinking about the future? Like, if we do this, this, and this, what is it going to look like next year? What is it going to look like 2 years ago? To get people to start thinking as leaders that they're going to have to be responsible, because your brain is not going to help you with that. It wants to do something with what you're currently interested in and expand your current interests, but it's not going to automatically now want you to think about what the impact and the influence is going to be about a choice that you're trying to make. You know, that's why you have to question yourself, and you have to have the capability of knowing that your brain's not going to go there unless you tell it to go there. You need to learn how to question yourself so that you can fill in the curiosity gap. So let's look at 3. The curiosity gap challenge is in addressing the disconnect between long-term and short-term interests, requiring changing one's focus from the momentary to something more forward-looking and ending. Okay, what is it? What have I just said? What have I just said? Just like the pause when we were looking earlier, curiosity, if you can follow what your brain wants to follow about the things that are currently interested to you, that's one thing. But if you're going to be a leader who is forward looking and looking at what we do now that's going to impact the future, you're gonna have to ask yourself that question because your brain isn't gonna ask it for you. Now, I'm oversimplifying that, but so when we look at this, the brain is super important for us, but your ability to question yourself, your ability to take control of your own thinking, to have an influence over your own thinking is critical to leadership. I like this little framework down below that I have used and taught for several years. The curiosity gap model. If you keep in mind that you really need to question yourself or about what's the critical attributes that I need to have accounted for. And as a leader, one of the things is that you really need to account for is if we do this, are we screwing up something that we'll have to fix next year? And maybe you say, yeah, but I got to do it. But if you at least ask yourself that question, we had a situation once with a particular school board member where we had gone through a whole year of working on procedures and the communicating for two people how we would deal with off-campus drinking of athletes in season when they should have been in training. They're off campus, they went to the party, they drank. What's the penalty? Because they were in training, but they're not on campus, they're doing it off campus. Okay. And so we had a automatic 2-week suspension that was mandatory from athletics. We said that they could practice or be with the team, not practice, but they could be with the team, but not practice. We had one particular board member whose good friend had a football player who had the misfortune of having consumed alcohol. And we were heading into the playoffs with the team, and he wanted to get a special dispensation and have a different penalty. And I didn't think that the board would approve that, but he was an important enough board member that the board did approve it. And so then it took us an entire year to go through the whole process again because the board approved that. And we ended up bringing back to the board the very same policy with the same incident responses that we had previously with a parent committee and coaches committees and all that kind of stuff. So that's an example of we just created more work for ourselves, and it, time is valuable. So, but look for the gap, find the gap. I mean, find what's really missing that you haven't considered. And then what are the attributes of that gap? What do we really need to fill in? And then fill the gap. And so to do that, you really have to know how it all works. And so you look for the gap, you find the gap, you do your homework on that gap, and then you fill that gap. Now, this is just a mental model that allows you to bring that kind of model of thinking into play when you're looking at a situation. Can be any situation, because you need to realize that your brain is not going to naturally take you there. It will take you, just like it did the board member who championed doing that. What was immediate interest? that board member had, who actually won out with other board members. There must have been a better way. Why would we deprive that young man of his right to participate in the playoffs? You know, sort of thing. It held up somehow. Okay, now I spent more time talking there just because I'm running out of time. So let me ask you this. So I like one more thing. Adaptation is the key to success for administrators, for leaders, for people that are going to lead anything. You have to adapt yourself to the circumstances, adapt your mindset, adapt your purpose in specific ways. I can remember a situation where we had a very, very unfortunate accident where a student was hit by a football at recess and hit dead on in the chest, and it actually hit in such a way with such force that it caused him to go into cardiac arrest and be sent to the hospital, and he passed. My situation as a superintendent, I was just a couple blocks away in a home and got the call from my secretary, and I went through a progression getting to the school right away as the fire at Lake Oswego Fire responded, and they were getting the student to the hospital. And so when I arrived on the scene, I know that if what I'm looking at is really true, and I've got some inclination of what's going on, my first response is operationally. Because I know that if we have a injury of this type, the press will be on it, the parents will be trying to come, and I need to have people build a shield for me, and so that I can go in there and deal with it. So I'm operationally focused. I got to get somebody here to start directing traffic outside and not let the press in. You know, we're likely to have a helicopter over our school as soon as the word gets out, because whatever happens in Lake Oswego becomes popular. The second thing I do is go into the building and isolate the teacher who was on duty at that time. And we try to make sense of, I need to understand the situation. I need to know the critical attributes of the situation. And then, because the teacher didn't do anything wrong, but she was in charge. And of course, she's very, very emotional about what's happened. And then, we're talking and I'm trying to reassure her, and, so I adapt to that kind of reassurance. Well, so let's wait and see here. The hospital's right there. LL Fire responded immediately, talking that way, giving her more support that way. And, it wasn't your fault, that sort of thing. And then the child died. So what was my next adaptation? It's time to hug her, which I don't, typically do with staff. And then to get her home safely. And each one of those moves had a different kind of purpose and strength and mindset. And so I've got just a few more minutes. And so when we talk about adaptation, this is the last nugget I'm going to share with you. Adaptation really matters to evolving and becoming what's going to be the result of the adaptation. And so, and what drives adaptation? Competition. Competition drives adaptation in nature, competition for food, for environment, for, so who are you competing with right now as you try to work with what we're trying to do together to have everybody learn and grow and help each other learn and grow? Who are you competing with? Trevor.
Would you be competing with your old ways of thinking and your already pre-established suppositions about what it is to be a leader and what has gotten you to where you are thus far, reestablishing and taking a pause and looking at what has served you the best and being intentional about moving forward with what we've learned in the class to be more effective? Question?
Great answer, because you're competing with yourself.
Yeah, Jamie?
You're not competing with other people to be, somebody said they wanted to be like Christopher, okay? I like Christopher too. He's amazing. But you're competing with yourself. You have strengths. You have ways that you have thought. You need to be better than yourself and work at it. You practice to become better at who you are. And you're not going to be as good as Christopher or other people who have strengths that you don't have or have knowledge that you don't have, but if you stop competing with yourself to get better at who you are, we're all works in progress. And so my goal here is to give you things to think about and practice that all you can pick from the stuff that you're going to really work on. And so I am going to turn it over to Christopher, and he's going to carry on and try to make sense of what the next step is on today's lesson. Thank you very much. You were great. Terrific. This is one heck of a great group. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Bill. Quick show of hands. How many people enjoyed our morning speaker today? That was pretty darn awesome. It was wonderful that they, as we discussed, really validated a lot of the things that Dr. Korach has been talking about. There were a number of things that came up today that I think were very important. Number one, the fact that a lot of our growth is going to take time and we have to have patience with that process. One of the things that we chatted about in our initial get together was the fact that it is our attention and our effort over time that drives results. And I know that I speak for not just myself, but Dr. Korach and Liz, when we say that what we would wish for you as you head into the new year is that we would wish that you have more and more of the things that matter most to you. So that is our very sincere wish to you, not just this holiday season, but all of the time. And we know that you will get results wherever you pay attention. So the key to having more of what matters most to you is really about keeping your attention on those things that matter most to you. So my question to you at the end of today's class that I'd love for you to share is there something that you've been exposed to over the course of this class that matters enough to you that you're going to be paying attention to it? So what is that functional takeaway that you have been finding valuable that you want to keep attending to? By giving voice to that, not only do you have an opportunity to clarify that for yourself, but you also have the opportunity for all of us to know, and this is where the value of community comes in. We all kind of help keep one another accountable for the things that matter most to us. So the first thing I'll ask, is there anybody who needs to go very quickly and wants to make certain that they get their answer up there? If so, use the raise your hand function so that you'll pop to the top left of my screen if anybody's in a rush. And if not, I will just start. Okay. Meredith, there you go. Liz, I can see. Thank you.
That took me way too long to raise my hand. But I do need to run. So, I've said this in every breakout group I think I've been in, probably the calls I've had with fellow members. The pause, just that word. And also, honestly, it's connected to all sorts of other things. But that is something that comes up every time for me. And I feel like I will be better at what I do, and the people around me will be better for that if that becomes kind of a part of my practice. So that's kind of mine. And I do have to run. So thank you all, and happy holidays.
Absolutely, Meredith. Thank you. Trevor?
I don't necessarily have to run, but I just wanted to, something just popped to my head. Something that I've actually been using ever since I heard it. It was what you said about reacting, and how your first reaction was your primary caregiver, the person that you were exposed to growing up. Second reaction is a secondary, and then your third reaction is one that you have developed. And I have used that time and time and again in my relationship since beginning in this class, both personally and professionally, to take a breath and pause, but more importantly, just realize that that is indeed very true. Like, that was a golden nugget that you said very early on that I've taken to heart. So I really appreciate that. And that is not to diminish anything else that we've been talking about. I was going to say something about optimistic resilience, just talking about today's lesson as well, of when you're starting your own business, of not giving up. And if you can't get back up, dust yourself off and try again, then you're not going to get very far, no matter how capable or intelligent or you are or happen to be. So, but yeah, definitely the whole reactionary thing, that was very powerful.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Glad to hear it. And I love Dr. Korach's definition for resilience. It's about how positively we respond to adversity. That's definitely going to be a takeaway for me as well. Jamie?
Okay, so I also have to run. So the intentionality, actually two things. The intentionality of where you're putting your attention is what's going to grow. We all know that, but like bringing it to the forefront, really, really important. The other thing, and I think this kind of summarizes the core of it, and I think we all also know that we need to work on it, but like being yourself, not being yourself in being what you need to be. So that's it seems like what we're encouraging in a functional manner. So that's my takeaway so far.
Thanks so very much, Jamie. And yes, you were absolutely the only one in here who could be you. So please do so. All right. Now, if nobody else has got a hand up, I'm just going to go through what I have on my screen. So bear with me. Dan, are you clapping or is that a hand up? Now you've just muted yourself, Dan. That's okay. We'll bear with you.
There you go. How am I doing now?
Now you're on.
All right, man. Life is coming together. I have a T-shirt that I bought though several years ago from a Navy SEAL outlet, and one of the things it said is, on the front it says "keep moving forward," and on the back it says, run, walk, crawl, roll, just keep moving forward. And I think all of us on different occasions have those days. Obviously, I'm not comparing anything that I go through with what the Navy SEALs go through, but I think in our own little worlds, some days we just feel like, man, this is just. But Trevor, what you just said about optimistic resilience, that is awesome. That if I was a tattoo man, I would get that tattooed, because that's an awesome phrase, and it goes to show you. And on the flip side, it was funny when I was going through my little situation this morning. I definitely took thought in just taking a breath. There was a time probably 15 to 20 years ago, she wouldn't have got the term 2 week, or she wouldn't have got the term. I used to have a saying, when someone says to you as an employer that they want to talk, there's two things. You're either dating them and they're breaking up, or they're quitting. So I used to say there's not any need for a further conversation. It's one of those two things, and we're not dating. So I'm assuming you're quitting. And over the years, I've learned that that's probably not the best approach. It doesn't really make for an open communication. So my maturity level was sitting here and listening to her entire story, and then coming back with a suitable response. I think in the long run probably works a little better, and it does. This class makes you reflect on that and makes you think on what makes you a good in the moment leader and a good long-term leader that is spoken of highly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. I'm glad we got to witness your growth and evolution just today. All right. I'm going to move on to Ken, and then I'm going to follow that with Shelley.
There we go. Yeah, so I think I know it's today, but Dan stop, drop, and roll. That for me, as I encounter different things that may be unexpected or contrary to expectations, that just to stop, drop my expectations or whatever the situation is, and just roll it off and roll through it. So
nice. Awesome. I love that too, Ken. Shelley, we're going to have you followed by Caitlin.
I'm discovering that mine's a lot more complex than I thought it would be. From the beginning, you asked what matters most to us. And I remember we got up and we talked about that. And mine was, I don't really know. And I've discovered what really matters most to myself is finding out what matters most to myself. And I'm discovering that I need to honor myself and give myself more credit than I have, that there's a lot about me that does matter. And that has just really opened up myself to be able to hear what everyone's saying and to really look at myself and put myself above everyone else in a way, if that's okay. Because I always was taught that being like thinking about yourself was selfish and a bad thing. And no, this has just really taught me that I can do that. And that's going to make me more aware of who I truly am.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shelley. Glad to hear it. Caitlin, I'm going to have you followed by Christina.
I guess mine would be that I feel like everybody has different things going on in life, and that's okay. But don't overreact. If someone says something, you kind of have to do like you guys said, like the stop, drop, and roll, but also like everybody has their own challenges. Sometimes we don't know what those are. So take a break, take a breath, and maybe come to a solution together for something.
Nice. Awesome. Christina, I'm going to have you followed by Sarah.
Absolutely. I think there's always so much, but today the one that was just striking a chord and resonating is kind of the ongoing theme of just being authentic and doing so with courage. So courageously leading and taking that leap and being okay to say, I know I'm your leader, but I don't have all the answers. So I think just being honest with everybody.
Thank you, Christina. Sarah, I'm going to have you followed by Jason.
For me, it again is that the power of the pause. And I think that's been the most influential for me currently. And I think moving forward as well is added with that is taking a moment to pause and then asking myself, like, what is the purpose or desired outcome? from whatever is happening, because lots of times I feel like, whether it's from a client or one of the teachers that I work with, like when they, just initial information, input, instead of just having an answer right away, taking the time to really think through what will be most beneficial for everyone and what is the goal, like what are we trying to get out of this, and then tailoring my response to that, because I am someone who quickly responds to things, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, because I'm really, and also I guess patience that goes with that, because I am an impatient person. I want to do things right now, get it done, move on. And so really taking the time to pause and reflect on what is our goal, what are we doing here, and what do we want to get out of this moving forward. And so having the patience to do that and taking the time and thinking through, I think that's been what's been really valuable to me so far.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Jason, I'm going to have you followed by Larry.
I got a student issue coming up, so I guess I better get speaking and get out of here. So I just, new district, new community, new processes, new systems, first year in this district. It's been an opportunity for me to just think about, there's obviously going to be reasons, there's going to be things I need to learn, and there's going to be things that I need to understand better. But there's things that I've brought to the table as well, and trying to fuse all that together, and at the same time be comfortable sharing that, my leadership style is that whole idea of taking that 24 hours when you get a frustrating email or frustrating thought from somebody, and that pause, and as well as being comfortable to share that, that being that leader, that guiding light, and saying like, hey, we're gonna learn this together, or what light do you already have that you can shine on me? And at the same time, if we fail, well, we're doing that together too, and we're going to figure out how to learn from that.
Thank you so much, Jason. Larry, I'm going to have you followed by Rachel.
Well, what I took away from Bill's model was really taking the time to stop with your short-term focus and think about your long-term goals. And what really sung to me was his resilience model, and particularly the purposeful focus and the recovery of momentum, that when you stop and think about your long-term goals, what is it you're trying to accomplish? And then stepping back and going back to, okay, what are the intentional things I can do? What are the incremental steps? You're not going to get to your long-term goal immediately, but you just have to be patient and keep working towards it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry. Rachel, I'm going to have you followed by Judy.
I would say for me, I always love the power of the pause. And so I've been really trying to use that a lot, along with patience, but also that curiosity gap. What is it that I don't know that I need to know to make the best long-term decision? So that to me is just, especially in today's, again, how do we look and find that gap? How do we understand, how important is the gap? So sometimes you might have a gap, but it's not as important as other gaps. So trying to just make sure to understand what that role is and how you fill it, and how you can just make better decisions based on that.
Absolutely. Judy, I'm going to have you followed by Parker and then Catherine. I need you to come off. There you go.
Well, I like the first thing that happened in the meet and greet. I was talking to Dr. Korach beforehand that leadership is all about relationships. And I didn't even think of that, that you have to make those connections. And I have done some things in my life that have blocked those connections, things that aren't building bridges, but that are blocking that or creating barriers. And I'm trying, after the first session, I did some things to try to get rid of some of those barriers. And I'm trying to work on that every day, getting rid of those barriers, because if we don't communicate or connect with people, we can't speak into their lives. We can't influence them. We can't build the trust or genuine mutual respect, admiration that we need to communicate and to have that kind of leadership towards them, to influence them, and also for them to influence us, because we have to realize the other yin and the yang part of it, that they are allowed to influence us too. So we need to be open and honestly assess ourselves and be able to allow them to speak into our lives too. It's not just that we need to lead them, but we need to serve them and allow them to lead us as well, because we might need some correction and we might need to be able to listen to it as well as just speaking all the time.
Absolutely, Judy. Thank you. Parker, I'm going to have you followed by Catherine.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that have been learned, and a lot of it has been in the class and outside of class, meeting with just various people here in the class and just personal learning and growth. But I think that kind of two things that I feel like I've been noticing or realizing and coming together with is that it kind of goes back to the stuff today of, preparation and resilience and readiness and those kinds of things, but, really knowing myself and where I want to be going and what is my why, so that is kind of my stable base to then be able to interact with people, to build relationships, to add value to them based on what I know I can give, rather than just kind of going in unprepared to a conversation, well, no expectation. So really preparing and knowing myself and knowing what I can do and what I can give, but then also being focused on the task at hand, whether it's a conversation with somebody, whether it's something I need to do for work, whether it's something I need to do for personal, but really intentionally putting time into that, and being prepared and being resilient when things don't go your way, and just kind of getting back on the horse and moving forwards. So
thank you, Parker. I'm going to move to Catherine, and Catherine, I'm going to have you followed by Joyce.
Yeah, I think it's come up a lot of times with people, just in patience and remembering that growth takes time. Not having, it's good to be like enthusiastic and to have a vision and to have all of these dreams and goals and stuff, but getting there takes a lot of time, and getting there with other people means working with other people and growing with other people, and that you can't just rush towards the finish line, that it's just a constant spectrum, and you get to the end and then there's more. And so it's always just good to remember that and to reflect on that.
Thank you, Catherine. Joyce, I'm going to have you followed by Kaylee.
Good morning, everyone. I was going to say good afternoon, but it's still morning. I always feel like I'm on a hamster wheel, even though there's 24 hours in a day. I'm just juggling multiple balls at the same time. So a lot of times I'm more reactive because there's only a certain limited amount of time, during the daylight hours. So I have to catch myself to pause. So for me, pausing is the most important attribute that I've learned from this class so far.
Great. Thank you so much, Joyce. Kaylee, I'm going to have you followed by Kelly.
Well, yes, learning so much, but I think something that I took from my personal life outside of this class was addition by subtraction. I find that, like Joyce was talking about, I can be more reactive and maybe get caught in patterns because of that. It's just what's familiar, and I can keep spinning my wheels a little bit. So finding ways to subtract from my day-to-day, whether it's not opening certain apps or avoiding, certain activities, in order to then have more focus and more presence to what I do want to do. And that ties in with this class because, like what Bill was speaking about, leadership is about the future. And if you're thinking about the future, you do have to take those necessary steps to get you there. And I think having a clear view of that by taking a lot of those additives out really does help.
Thank you, Kaylee. Kelly, I'm going to have you followed by Andrea.
Thank you. I think there's so many layers to it, right? I think the human experience is full of fractals, and within that fractalization are these experiences. But what I find for myself is to go back again to that pause, which is so much of it, but I attribute it to the 0 point. And the 0 point is that center point of the fern as it unfurls, and always going back into that 0 point of all things that are possible in that moment. And so that's how I look at it, within that state of observation, of witness, of showing up authentically with who I am in the moment at that time, but trying to remind myself to stay within that zone of possibility of all experiences. So that to me is a stabilizing force. And this is doing the shadow work too, recognizing when I'm out of that 0 point and way down the unfurling of that frond before I've even had a moment to really look around everything else that surrounds it.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly. And I want to get your name correctly. Was it Andrea? I know you corrected somebody.
That's right, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. I appreciate it. First of all, I clearly missed a really powerful lecture on the pause. So I'm going to go back and listen to that recording. Today's speakers actually really coincided and affirmed what I am finding just in the last session and this one, which is recognizing that we're continually learning how to be our best selves and what we need to do in order to show up as our best selves every day. And our work is fairly unpredictable. We never know who's coming in, who's going to show up, and that they may not be showing up as their best self. And so for me, I think being really intentional about, what I think it was Mark, I'm not sure who said it this morning, but being your best, paying attention to your mental and your physical and your spiritual well-being, so that when you show up in the morning, you are ready for whatever adaptation you need to make that day. So that's really what has hit me.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Speaking of Mark.
Mark. So one of my favorite quotes from the Dalai Lama is, all suffering comes from attachment. The more attachment, the more suffering. And so, part of this business of being curious is not being attached to, one momentary channel of thought. And, some languages have a way of describing where we can live if we're in spontaneity, just like the Eskimos have 50 or 60 ways of describing snow. The Tibetans have a word called bardo. Bardo is the space between the moments defined by thoughts. The space between death and rebirth is also a bardo. The space of dreaming is a bardo. And there's huge richness in that space, in that bardo. And so, I've had a lot of fun for 50 years playing in the bardos that I managed to fill up all the time and constantly am trying to empty.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. I'm going to move Floyd. I don't know if your microphone works. If it still doesn't work, you can type a little note to all of us if your fingers are feeling facile. And then we'll go to Cicely, and from Cicely, we'll go to Laura. Whenever you're ready, Cicely.
Oh, I am ready here. So there's so much. There's so much. I feel like I'm really growing, even though I'm physically petite. I like the part of resiliency. Number 3 resonated with me the most, when you pursue a promise. And this is where there's so much layer and deep in there. First of all, we have to think, what is really your promise? Sometimes you just get deep into the pattern that you think that is a promise, but it's not. So just have to wake up and aware what really is your promise at the bigger pictures. You got to be into the mode of keep questioning yourself. And earlier we're talking about become a curious or a good thinker. It's not always clear that way, but would rather a curious, good thinker person to get you where, what, and continuously collect fact, data, patterns about yourself, about other, and redefine clearly of what is your promise. That's what I learned.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cicely. Laura, we're going to go from you to Hamara.
I'm really thinking about the redefining leadership for myself, and the difference between knowing that definition and really believing that definition, being new to a leadership position. I experience a little bit of the imposter syndrome, and I'm learning to hold both, beginning to value my experiences and my knowledge and value that, while also really learning to be a good listener and hear what other people are coming with. And I think finding that balance between those things is a part of defining myself as a leader, and taking all these ideas that I hear and agree with and really internalizing them to believe them, not just hear and know them, but to say, yes, this is what I believe a leader is. Because I don't think I see myself as what I defined a leader as. And so I think I'm still kind of working with that and grappling with that part.
Thank you for saying so, Laura. Trust us, you're a leader. We'll go to Humara, and then from Humara, we'll go to Nancy.
Oh, good morning. Today's session really helped me in valuing the knowledge and the values that you have as a leader, how you can reflect on that. And but yet you have to still like you said, the stop, drop, and roll thing really helped me in analyzing. Not everybody knows everything 100%. You have to sometimes slow the ride. You need to give your body or your car to react, to move in a different direction. So that's where the pause and patience comes in. Every situation is different. You know you have these values, but yet you might not be able to use them right then and there because of the severity of the situation and the way it affects you. That is what I'm trying to reflect and think on after this session, is how our world is changing. People are, behind the keyboards and typing away their thoughts and ideas and everything, and it has an effect, whatever you put out on there. So how do I learn from that and take the data and change my assumptions on what the generation now is wanting? So it's kind of complex for me. I need to sit back and relax and talk to people to come out what is it that I want. But I kind of have an idea. I like today's session, the way the speakers talked about the certain values that they still have when they were changing the board or whatever, the leadership. That's the values that continued. And I want those values that our current generations are also aware of and using them. I just want to collect the data, basically. I'm in that process where I need to collect more data because our world is changing.
Okay, thank you very much, Humara. Nancy, we're gonna go to you, but we're going to acknowledge that Floyd said great presentations today.
Excellent. I know that I will be carrying into the month what Mark was focusing on in his great talk this morning, and that's lifting up others and bringing out the best in people. I was very inspired by that. Thanks.
Awesome. Me too. Well, again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us in our final class of the year. It's been a great pleasure to have you here. It's always wonderful to see your faces. We wish you all the best this holiday season. May you have some warm and meaningful times, however you choose to celebrate. And we will look forward to seeing you all in the new year. And so have a fantastic day. Say something, Trevor.
I was a little late today. My schedule's been thrown off because we've adopted 2 golden doodle puppies. So I'm going to flip the camera around. They're playing right now. So Bo is the black one and Roxy is the tan one.
It's like
they're